Sam Darnold signed a 3-year deal this offseason worth just over $100 million. Seattle hopes to get the Darnold we saw the first 16 games of last season. The Vikings were virtually unstoppable. Darnold was on point, but man, those last 2 games, Week 18, the loss to the Lions and the wild card loss in Arizona to the Rams, Darnold's off-target percentage doubled, and his QBR was, a quarter of what it was the first 16 games? Darnold addressed that rough finish in an interview with The Athletic, saying, quote, "For lack of a better term, we laid an egg as an offense, and I think for me personally, that sucks. I felt like we were a really good team, but at the end of the day, and this is going to sound a little pessimistic, but when you get to the end of it and you don't win the whole thing, you failed. I feel like I could have played better, to be completely honest with you. I feel like I didn't play up to my standard. I truly feel that way. I feel like if I would have just played better, I would have been able to give the team a chance." In Darnold's defense, he was sacked 9 times in that wild card loss, Kraz. The Seahawks, they bring in Darnold, one of many changes they made to this offense. What more can you tell us about Seattle's decisions to reshape that side of the ball?
Well, the Seahawks went into the offseason expecting to be able to re-sign Gino Smith to play quarterback for them. He had 1 year left on his contract. But quickly after they got into negotiations, they offered him a deal kind of similar to, in value to what the Rams were offering Matthew Stafford, a little bit less. They got the sense quickly that Gino Smith didn't necessarily want to commit to them long term, that there was somewhere else he would rather be, and that he was willing to play out his contract and go to free agency if that's what it came to. They correctly identified the team that he had in mind and traded him there rather than wait a year and get nothing for him. So Darnold was one of the options. They looked into Justin Fields. They kicked around the Aaron Rodgers idea, but they decided Darnold at age 28, coming off the year he just had, is somebody that can build on the success he's had, the coaching he's gotten from Kyle Shanahan 2 years ago, Kevin O'Connell this past year, and continue that upward trajectory. The contract they gave him doesn't really tie them to him beyond this year, so it's just Seattle trying to look for solutions that don't involve overpaying at the quarterback position.
And a new OC as well, Clint Kubiak, a series of 1-year stays since he left the OC post in Minnesota. Passing game coordinator, Denver, San Francisco, OC last year in New Orleans. Mina, what are your expectations for the Seattle offense this year?
I think the whole thing is going to hinge on whether or not the pass protection improves. You talked about how Darnold's performance fell off at the end of last year in the playoffs. That really coincided with the Vikings' offensive line struggling towards the end. So we can explain it, but now he goes to a Seattle team that's also had offensive line struggles. They did draft a guard in the first round, but that interior still concerns me. Clint Kubiak, the offensive coordinator you allude to, some of the things he does on offense can alleviate this to a degree. But we just saw in New Orleans when they lost members of their offensive line, particularly on the interior, everything fell apart too. So to me, that's the entire sort of fulcrum on which their offense hinges, or I guess is going to be based upon, is whether or not he can get good pass protection.
Yeah, you know it. I mean that it all kind of works together too, like a perfect puzzle, right? When you look at that offensive line, they didn't make a bunch of changes, but Clint Kubiak coming in, running that kind of Kyle Shanahan style offense, it's developed and designed to help mitigate some of those things. Get your offensive line moving, using those outside zones, and also go heavy play action, getting your quarterback out of the pocket, giving him clear pitches, because with Sam Darnold, when he hangs onto the football, it gets dangerous. If you go look at those last 2 games, that's exactly what happened. He was taking too many sacks. He was indecisive. So can you get him playing fast? Can you get him making quick decisions? And can his pass catchers, which are Cooper Kupp and JSM, can they get open quickly enough for him to continue firing on all cylinders? Because I can't say out of one side of my mouth that the Vikings infrastructure was the reason for Sam Darnold's success. And then when he goes to Seattle, not say that that infrastructure needs to be there. I do think they have the makings for it. Sam Darnold's still young. I think he'll add to that and have a really good season.
Mina, back to a point you made. 54 sacks allowed for Seattle last season. Only 2 teams gave up more. Gino Smith felt the brunt of those. Time now for quick reads. A bunch of QBs changing helmets. Let's stick with Smith, Mina. How much confidence do you have he'll play well in Vegas?
I had a lot of confidence. I love this fit. I think Vegas could be one of the best 12 personnel, 2 tight end teams in the league, and that's something that Gino Smith was very good at in Seattle, throwing to tight ends, top 4 in completion percentage and passer rating. Now he gets 2 tight ends who are better in Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer I think this is going to be a seamless fit and a really dynamic passing attack.
There's a lot of new in Seattle for the upcoming season, right? You got the same head coach and Mike McDonald. This year is year 2 for him, but there's a new quarterback in town. That is Sam Darnold, who is going to be under center for Seattle. Sam Darnold had a remarkable run with the Vikings, a Pro Bowl season, but just not the most ideal ending to that season, right? Seattle, they opened their season against San Francisco. They also bookended with San Francisco as well. And Sam Darnold also has a new weapon on offense in Cooper Kupp, who he's going to be throwing the ball to as well. Let's welcome on our Super Bowl champs, Brian B. Mac McFadden, and also a guy who knows a thing or two about the Seahawks, and Robert Turman. Welcome, gentlemen, here. Thanks for joining us. We're going to talk about the Seahawks and a season outlook. We're no longer talking about Gino and DK. We're looking at Sam Darnold and Cooper Kupp. So for that aspect of the offense, B. Mac, I'll come to you first here. What are your expectations for the offense when you're considering all of the new pieces that Seattle picked up in the offseason?
Honestly, Jacqueline, for me, Rob, to be determined. I don't know, because we don't know exactly the consistency in which the quarterback will give them in terms of production in Sam Darnold. Remember, before 2024, Sam Darnold was an emotional roller coaster in terms of being consistent and, most importantly, making routine plays happen routinely. But then came the opportunity with Kevin O'Connell in the Minnesota Vikings that led to a 4,300 passing yard season, completed around 66% of his passes, 35 passing touchdowns. Really exceeded the expectations because there were no expectations. But because of how well he played a year ago, he was able to turn that outstanding season into a nice contractual opportunity with the Seattle Seahawks. And get this, he is QB1. So can he live up to the billing? Because before 2024, Robert, we've never seen the level of play from Sam Darnold in his professional career before he got with Kevin O'Connell in the Minnesota Vikings. Now, because of the contract, the expectations are higher than what they were a year ago. Can he live up to those expectations, Robert? Not just in week 1, week 2, week 3, but the entire season, because that's what they paid for. And because of how his career started before 2024, I don't know if he can live up to the billing. So that's why it's to be determined for me, because I got to see it before I believe it.
Yeah, it's so crazy because the conversation would be so different if those last 2 games were just had different endings for Sam Darnold, right? Robert, I'll come to you here because you know what it takes, right, to win a Super Bowl with this organization as a running back. I know you have a relationship with Ken Walker. So what are the conversations being had? What is the vibe there in that backfield as they're looking to try to get to the pinnacle once again?
Well, it's all positive. And B-Mac, you make a great point in terms of Sam Darnold and, you know, all the things that he's going to have to establish coming into being the starting quarterback this season. And another piece of that is, what's the relationship going to be like between him and new offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak? And the thing that Sam Darnold had in Minnesota, run game behind Aaron Jones. He had one of the best wide receivers in Justin Jefferson. Not necessarily a downgrade when he comes to Seattle, but they do have to do a better job establishing their run game with Kendall Walker III, Zach Charbonnet, and the rest of those running backs in the running back room. What is Jackson Smith-Njigba going to do this season? He took a huge step last year. Can he take another one? Obviously, Cooper Kupp is out there as well, the savvy veteran, but can he still get separation in one-on-one coverage? And so, you know, a lot of the attention gets put on the quarterback, and rightfully so, but it is a team game. The rest of the offense is going to have to hold their fort as well, the offensive line being a big piece of that also. Now, they drafted a left guard, Greg Zabel, in the first round to boost the interior of that offensive line, but are they going to be able to hold up? And I think those are the big question marks for Seattle.
And they drafted Jalen Milroe as well. We know that Sam Darnold is QB1 as it stands right now, but there are reports coming out of training camp that he's really progressing. He's been picking up the offense, all positive things for Jalen Milroe. So, Turbo, how beneficial is it for Jalen Milroe? Because there was conversations of him in the draft process, like, I don't know if he's ready, should he go? But having that opportunity to go to an organization like Seattle and learn a little bit behind Sam Darnold and kind of not be thrown right into things, how beneficial is that for Jalen Milroe at this stage of his career?
It's great. I mean, the benefits are huge for him. If you look at other quarterbacks and some examples, you know, Jordan Love got to sit behind Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers sat behind Brett Favre. Pat Mahomes sat before he was a starter behind Alex Smith. You look at Anthony Richardson now in Indianapolis, kind of thrown into the fire with what you're saying, and he's had some struggles. And so for Jalen Milroe to be able to sit back with a great offensive mind and Clint Kubiak, who's the offensive coordinator, and not have the pressure of being the starter right away, I think it's hugely beneficial for him. I think eventually, it may not be this year, but I think he'll be a starter for Seattle at some point in his career. He's that talented, but to be able to learn the game from the sideline first is going to be humongous for him.
Let's switch things over to the defensive side of the ball. This squad really looking to make strides in year 2 under Mike Macdonald. So, B-Mac, what is your confidence level that we can see improvements on the defense in Seattle?
My confidence level is really, really high, and it's because I believe in Mike Macdonald. His ability to scheme up great defensive opportunities for his players has been well documented, not to mention the timely ability to be aggressive and hit on those aggressive calls. Then when you look at the personnel, Leonard Williams was outstanding a year ago. People often overlook what he did last season, Robert Turbin, when you look at 11 sacks. Now, they need a massive jump from Byron Murphy II, right? Rookie, a year ago, first-round selection. Didn't really, scratch the surface and being dominant, but we know the potential was there. Hopefully, he takes a massive jump, not to mention DeMarcus Lawrence. He only played in 4 games for the Dallas Cowboys a year ago. We know what type of difference maker he can be, and I love Devon Witherspoon in the back end. I think he's set up to have an all-pro-like year because of his aggressiveness, not to mention how instinctive he is in terms of attacking the ball. And Nick Emanwori, I understand he might be a name you might not throw out in the month of September, but by October, November, I believe he will be Mike Macdonald's version of Kyle Hamilton, the player he coached in Baltimore, based on the skill set that Nick Emanwori has in terms of being versatile, not to mention very, very aggressive.
So, gentlemen, we want to get the schedule predictions very quickly. The Seahawks, they start and end their schedule with the Niners, a handful of primetime games. But, Robert, what is the schedule prediction for the Seahawks for 2025?
I think it's a 9-8 season for Seattle, and that's positive. I think Seattle fans, might look at that as a little bit of a disappointment, but when you think about the newness that's on the offensive side of the football, the upgrades on defense, I think are great, but there's too many question marks, I think, still on the offensive side, where I think 9-8 to me is a good record for them. I think that's good enough to be a wild card team in the NFC this season. Hard to win games, but that's my prediction for them this year.
Rob, great minds think alike. Me and Rob did not talk about the schedule, what we thought the prediction would be, but I'm right there with you. I see 9-8 as well. And I can easily see the NFC West having 3 teams potentially getting to the playoffs. So I think this will be a very, very competitive division. I could see that could be a reality when you look at some of the top teams in the NFC West. But to your point, 9-8 is, I think, is a realistic number. And like I said, there will be a lot of pressure on Sam Darnold and offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak to be able to get the most out of this offense, starting with the quarterback.
All right, so the guys are...
No bias, B-Mac. I told you. No bias.
You did? Hey, that's why you're a professional.